What if I told you the most lethal response is no response at all? That the sharpest form of power isn't found in chaos, but in calm, surgical silence. When someone expects you to explode, beg, chase, or bleed, and you do none of it, they begin to unravel. They don't fear you screaming, they fear you disappearing, because silence cannot be manipulated. Silence doesn't defend itself. It just sits there, cold, calculated, and echoing through their mind like a ticking clock. The more they try to pull you back in, the more their own thoughts betray them. You don't need to destroy them, just leave the stage, and they'll tear the curtain down themselves, searching for a version of you that no longer exists. When you let someone go without ceremony, without a closing argument, without a final scream, you hand them the mirror they've been avoiding. You force them to face themselves. And most of them aren't built for that. So while they fall apart trying to understand your calm, you ascend, detached, clean, untouchable. Because your silence is not absence, it's control. Comment below if you feel this shift in power. My silence rewires their chaos. Number 1. You're not cold. You're in control. They'll call you cold the moment they can't use your warmth to manipulate you. They'll say you've changed when you stop bending for their comfort. But the truth is simple. When you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, when you stop performing, you become untouchable. And untouchable looks like cruelty to those who were banking on your chaos. This is not about being heartless. It's about being disciplined. You don't chase, you observe. You don't argue, you calculate. Your silence is not emptiness. It's refinement. The world worships emotional outbursts because they're predictable, they're exploitable. But stillness? Stillness terrifies them. Because no one can predict a mind that doesn't flinch. So let them misunderstand you. Let them call it distance, arrogance, coldness, whatever helps them cope. Because while they're labeling you, you're mastering yourself. Power doesn't beg to be understood, it just exists. Calm, silent, immovable. Comment if you've outgrown the need to explain. I'm not cold, I've outgrown chaos. Number 2, let them suffer in the silence they created. They wanted chaos, so you gave them nothing. Not revenge, not reaction, just silence. And that silence? It hits harder than any scream ever could, because when someone thrives on your emotional response, your stillness starves them. When they can't provoke you, they are left alone with the mess they made, replaying their own actions, drowning in their own questions. The same manipulation they used to control you now loops back on them like a curse. They thought they could drag you into their fire, but instead they're burning alone. The silence you gave them is not a lack of care, it's a mirror, and it doesn't lie. Every game, every insult, every power play, it echoes back now unanswered. They expected drama, they got distance, and that distance becomes a haunting. You didn't punish them, they punished themselves, because eventually the only voice they hear is their own, and that's where their collapse begins. Comment if you've stopped feeding the chaos. Let them drown in the silence they begged for. Number 3, don't explain. Don't warn, just vanish. The moment you start explaining your silence, you start losing your power. You don't owe anyone a roadmap to your evolution. You don't owe them closure, clarity, or comfort. The people who pushed you, disrespected you, underestimated you, why would you gift them an exit plan? That's what warnings are, exit plans, control handoffs. An opportunity for them to spin the narrative before you even walk away. They'll pretend to listen just so they can interrupt. They'll beg for your reasons only to twist them into guilt. That's how they stay in control, by keeping you emotionally entangled in the story. But when you vanish with no warning, no explanation, no dramatics, you strip that power away, you remove the stage, the lights, the script, and all that's left is their own reflection. staring back at them, with no one left to blame. This is not about ghosting, it's about graduating. It's about outgrowing conversations that were never meant to be resolved. Some people don't deserve your closure. They deserve your silence because they never heard you when you were speaking. They only heard what they could use. They weren't listening to understand. They were listening to maintain leverage. And now that leverage is gone, just like you, quietly, strategically, irrevocably. Your disappearance sends a message their ears could never translate. I've seen enough, I've had enough, and I no longer care enough to explain. You want to break their pattern? Do the one thing they can't handle. Be unavailable. Emotionally, physically, mentally, just gone. They expected war, you gave them a ghost. They expected closure, you gave them consequence. And the consequence is this: they now have to sit with every unfinished word, every manipulative move, every unanswered message, and realize that no explanation is coming. Ever. Because when you walk away, without noise, without begging, without proving your point, you show them that you were never desperate to be understood. You were just waiting for the moment you didn't have to be. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. Comment if you've mastered the art of the quiet exit. I vanish without warning, and they never see it coming. Number 4, what they wanted was control, not closure. They never truly wanted understanding. They wanted leverage. That's the part most people miss. The plea for closure is rarely about healing. It's about pulling you back into a position where they still have access to your mind. They'll say, "Just talk to me," or "I need to understand." But what they really need is a foothold, a crack in your boundary, a single thread of emotional vulnerability they can pull on until you unravel. That's not resolution, that's re-entry. They disguise it in empathy, but it's strategy. Because if they can get you explaining yourself, they can get you doubting yourself. And when you start doubting, you're no longer free. You're back under their control. Understand this: control doesn't always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like guilt, like concern, like fake softness. The same person who disrespected you will suddenly act like they care about your peace, just to pull you back into their storm. And the moment you respond, the moment you try to bring them clarity, you've handed them the steering wheel again. That's how subtle it is. That's how fragile your power becomes the second you start needing to be understood by people who never valued your clarity to begin with. So, don't chase closure. Don't clarify your silence. Let them live in the fog they created. If they truly wanted peace, they would have given it while they had you. But they didn't. They wanted dominance. And now that they've lost access to your emotions, they're scrambling for any version of control they can recreate. Don't fall for it. You're not cold, you're awake. The most powerful response is not cruelty, it's absence. Not because you're punishing them, but because you've removed the tool they once used to play you, your need to be understood. You've outgrown that, and now the silence is permanent. That's the shift they never expected, because it's the one they can't manipulate. Let them wonder, let them invent reasons, because no version they create will bring them control again. That's what disturbs them most, not your silence, but their helplessness within it. Comment if you're done feeding false closure. They lost access, not answers. Number 5, your absence becomes their obsession. There comes a moment when your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Not because you were dramatic, not because you made a scene, but because you simply removed yourself cleanly, completely, and without explanation. That's what unsettles them. They didn't fear losing you. They feared not being able to predict you. And when you left without noise, without begging, without leaving breadcrumbs, they lost their ability to read you. That's when the obsession begins. They didn't value your consistency when it was offered. They didn't respect your patience while it lasted, and they certainly didn't believe your detachment would ever be permanent. You see, they thought you'd always return, that you'd always explain, that you'd always feel the need to resolve. Because that's the game they were playing. Feed you inconsistency and watch you chase stability. But when you suddenly stop participating in the cycle, when you vanish from the role they assigned you, their illusion of control collapses. Now they're stuck in a loop of their own design, replaying every word you said, every move you made, every detail they once ignored. Not out of love, don't get it twisted, out of control, out of the unbearable uncertainty of not knowing what's next, because people who crave power hate unsolved puzzles. And you, by leaving silently, became one, a riddle with no answer, a door that closed without slamming, character that exited the story without warning. They'll check your online status at 2 a.m., scroll through old messages, search for signs that you still care. They'll ask about you indirectly, send subtle signals, maybe even stage emotional bait to test your reaction. But when you stay silent, when you don't flinch, when you don't bite, that's when the spiral deepens. You've shifted from being someone they overlooked to someone they can't stop thinking about. That's the brutal irony. They ignored your presence, but now they're haunted by your absence. Your silence becomes their soundtrack. Every day without a reply becomes a reminder of the access they lost. And not just access to you, but access to power, to validation, to emotional supply. You didn't just walk away. You turned off the faucet they were draining dry. But here's where it gets colder. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to protect yourself. And that's what they can't accept. Because as long as they believed they had the power to provoke you, they believed they still mattered. Now, you've made it clear they don't. Not through words, through withdrawal, through nothingness, through psychological distance so vast it cannot be bridged with apologies or performance. Your absence becomes a mirror, one they can't shatter, one that reflects everything they are, without the filter of your empathy. The manipulator sees the emptiness of their games. The narcissist sees the void where admiration used to exist. The user sees the emptiness that follows when the resource walks away. You didn't have to expose them. Your absence did it for you. And this is what they never prepared for. Most people are conditioned to fight noise with noise. But when you give them silence, when you remove not just yourself but your energy, your validation, your reaction, that's psychological starvation. They beg for confrontation just to feel something. But you don't give them even that. You leave no closure, no conflict, no warning, just absence, pure, still, unshakable absence. And that becomes the most haunting thing of all. Let them stalk, let them guess, let them build theories in their head, because the more they try to decode your silence, the more they lose control of their own thoughts. This isn't cruelty, it's justice served cold. You gave them time, you gave them clarity, you gave them loyalty, and in return they gave you confusion, delay, emotional games. So now you've given them nothing, and nothing is what they never saw coming. And here's the psychological twist. Obsession thrives where certainty dies. You were once familiar, predictable, dependable. Now you are none of those things. Now you are an unknown variable, and nothing drives the human mind into madness faster than not knowing. That's what turns your silence into obsession. They don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves that had access to you. They miss the control, the attention, the reassurance that no matter how they treated you, you'd still be there. But you're not. And that's the fracture they can't repair. Let them ask, what happened? Let them wonder, was it something I did? Let them search for you in places where you've already erased your footprints, because each day that passes without your response makes one thing clearer. They were never in control. Your absence exposed their weakness. Your distance exposed their dependence. And now they are stuck in the very game they tried to play with you, left hanging, waiting, obsessing, and unraveling without any idea if the silence will ever end. Spoiler, it won't. Because you've mastered the one thing they never expected from you: emotional detachment. You've rewired your reflexes. You no longer respond to bait. You no longer feed the fire. You've become immune to the chaos. And in doing so, you've taken back every ounce of your power. There is nothing more terrifying to a manipulator than the moment you no longer respond. That's when the obsession truly begins. That's when your silence isn't just silence, it's dominance. Not loud, not aggressive, just total, unshakable, irreversible detachment. And they will never admit it. But they'll think about you when they're alone. They'll compare others to you in secret. They'll look for you in places you've outgrown. And in every moment of that quiet obsession, you win. Because your absence, executed with surgical calm, has become the storm they can't escape. Comment if you've made someone relive your silence on a loop. They didn't lose me, they lost their grip on me. Number 6. They'll replay everything. While you move forward, they thought they ended the conversation. They thought the silence meant closure, but they were wrong, because while you moved forward, they remained trapped in the echo chamber of their own actions. They'll never admit it publicly, but they've replayed every word you said, every look, every moment they dismissed. They'll run it all back, trying to find the exact frame where they lost control of you. And the cruel twist is this: they'll never find it. Because you didn't explode, you didn't beg, you just stopped. And that kind of ending doesn't give them a point of reference, it gives them madness. They'll analyze your last message, your last facial expression, your last moment of eye contact, like it's a crime scene. They'll imagine what you're thinking, they'll picture what they could have said differently. But no matter how many times they run it through their head, nothing adds up. That's because your silence wasn't reactive, it was final. That's what's breaking them now. Not the loss of access, but the loss of meaning. Because they built their sense of importance on your reaction, and now that reaction is gone, so is their illusion of superiority. You're not stuck like they are. You're not circling old messages or feeding off digital breadcrumbs. You're not waiting for closure that will never come, because you understood something vital. They gave you their pattern, and you used it to predict their limits. Once someone shows you they lack depth, you stop trying to swim in them. That's why you move forward without resistance, not because it didn't hurt, but because you finally saw that your peace was more important than their chaos. The most strategic move you made wasn't cutting contact, it was cutting emotional investment. You took back your energy. You stopped performing. You stopped waiting for validation. And in doing so, you reset the game in your favor. You became unpredictable. That's what keeps them awake at night, because now they can't guess what you'll do next. They can't bait you, guilt you, or manipulate you back into position. And when a manipulator can't read you, they unravel, quietly, slowly, completely. They'll watch from the shadows, they'll pretend not to care, but behind the mask, they're studying you. Every move you make that shows growth, confidence, calm, they feel it like a sting. Not because they want your success, but because it confirms what they feared, that you never needed them, that they were only powerful as long as you believed they were. And now, that belief is gone. Along with your silence came your evolution, and now every step forward you take becomes a trigger they can't suppress. They won't show up with apologies, no. That would be too honest. Instead, they'll disguise their obsession. A like, a view, a mutual friend repeating your name. They'll look for indirect routes back into your attention. But don't mistake that for healing. It's not love, it's ego injury. And ego, once wounded by silence, becomes the most dangerous thing a person carries. They're not hoping to reconnect. they're hoping to reclaim, and you owe them neither. You're building, quietly, strategically, without spectacle, while they spin in place, still trying to solve a version of you that no longer exists. The more you evolve, the more foreign you become to their old blueprint, and that creates the psychological trap. They're obsessed with getting a response from someone who has already outgrown their entire game. You're not just gone, you've upgraded, and that makes you unreachable. Every success you post, every photo you share, every sign that you're living untouched by them, it eats at the narrative they built. The story where you needed them, the lie that you were dependent. But now, they're the ones stuck in need, needing answers, needing clarity, needing access. And the more they need, the less they get. That's not revenge, that's detachment doing its job. Because you're no longer thinking in terms of the past, you've seen the cost of emotional entanglement with people who benefit from your confusion, you've tasted the peace that comes from silence, and you've realized something powerful. Some people aren't meant to be confronted, they're meant to be outgrown. Let them chase the closure they refuse to give. Let them spiral, because that spiral, it's not yours anymore. It's theirs to live in. You're not just ahead, you're gone. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You've outpaced the story, and while they linger in the last chapter, trying to rewrite it in their favor, you're already writing something new, something clean, something real. Their mind will loop forever in the moment you left, because that moment marked the beginning of their loss and your rebirth. You won't look back, not out of spite, but because there's nothing back there for you. Growth demands you stay forward-focused. Let them rot in reruns. Let them live on rewind. Because the mind that once toyed with yours is now a prisoner of its own unfinished game, and you're free. Comment if you've left someone stuck in a past you've already burned. I moved on. They stayed behind, stuck in the silence they earned. Number 7. Revenge is a weak man's war. You're past that. There was a time when you wanted to strike back, when the pain they caused made you fantasize about showing them exactly who they lost. A time when revenge felt like the only language they would understand. You imagined the message you'd send, the scene you'd create, the way you'd watch their face when you finally said everything they deserved to hear. But then something inside you shifted. You realized that any plan that ends with them thinking about you still gives them power. And that's not revenge, that's residue. That's letting them live inside your mind, rent-free, even after they've already drained your peace. The truth is, revenge is emotional poverty. It feels like control, but it's rooted in the same desperation you're trying to escape. You don't get even with someone who's beneath you. You evolve so far above their reach, they no longer qualify for your attention. That's where true power lives. Not in the moment you clap back, but in the moment you stop caring enough to. Let them wonder how you feel. Let them assume you're still bothered. Meanwhile, you're not plotting, you're detaching. You're not wounded, you're wiser. Revenge is a trap. It keeps your energy tied to the very thing that tried to break you, and that's the cruel trick of it. It pretends to be strength while it drains your focus. You think you're winning by proving something to them, but you're still playing their game. You're still tethered to their chaos. The most savage move is not revenge, it's redirection. It's building a life so full, so untouchable, so disciplined, that they can no longer enter the room, even in your mind. You don't need them to regret losing you. You need to reach a place where their regret is irrelevant. Because here's the secret they don't teach you. Most people who hurt you don't care enough to regret it. And even if they do, it won't change them. It won't undo what they did. It won't rebuild what they broke. So what exactly are you chasing? An apology that will never feel sincere? A reaction that won't heal you? Power that's tied to their recognition? That's not growth. That's dependency in disguise, and you've outgrown that. You're not here to be pitied. You're not here to be validated by the same hands that tried to break you. You're here to rise, silently and strategically. Let others fight loud wars. Let them burn time proving they weren't weak. You've already proved that by not showing up. Your absence is the message, your silence is the headline, because the highest form of power doesn't scream, it watches, it waits. It walks away when staying would mean sinking. You don't win by making them feel pain. You win by no longer being accessible to it. That's not just growth, that's psychological supremacy. They expected you to snap, to fight, to lose your mind trying to make them see your value. But when you didn't respond, didn't retaliate, didn't chase, that was the kill shot. That was the ending they couldn't rewrite. Because there's no comeback for silence. There's no defense against emotional indifference. And now, long after the noise has faded, they're left with the weight of something they never expected. Your absence as a permanent consequence. Let them imagine you're still angry. Let them assume you're bitter, because they'll be more haunted by your calm than they ever were by your chaos. Your refusal to participate is what sets you apart. You're no longer living in reaction. You're moving in design. Quiet, calculated, unapologetic. That's a kind of power they'll never understand, because it's rooted in self-mastery, not emotional volatility. You don't play the game, you leave the arena. You've redirected all that fire, not to burn bridges, but to build walls they can't climb. And behind those walls you've created something rare. Peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that doesn't flinch at old names or familiar patterns. The kind that doesn't crave revenge because it already feels whole. They didn't take anything from you. They revealed everything about themselves. That knowledge, that awareness, that's the gift. And the best part? You paid nothing for it, except your time, which you'll never waste again. The idea of revenge only tempts people who haven't discovered real discipline. Because once you've tasted focus, silence, solitude, you stop craving noise. You stop wanting to prove things to people who were never qualified to judge you in the first place. You're not in the business of convincing, you're in the business of building. And you don't build anything by looking backward. Everything you need to say has already been said by your exit. They won't understand that. They'll keep watching, waiting, trying to trigger a response that's no longer coming. Let them. They're stuck in a war that you've already left. Their obsession is their prison. Their fixation is their punishment. While they try to rewrite the past, you're designing a future where they no longer exist. That's not revenge. That's power. Cold, clean, complete. You don't owe them your fire. You owe yourself your future. Let them talk. Let them circle. Let them pretend they don't care while stalking everything you do. Because the more you say nothing, the more they hear it. The more you reveal nothing, the more they feel it. And the more you do without them, the more they realize they were never necessary. Comment this if you've stepped beyond the need for revenge. My silence outlasts their noise, and that's enough. Number 8. Self-mastery means you no longer bleed for clarity. At some point, you stop needing to explain your silence. You stop needing to clarify your choices, defend your exit, or justify your peace. That's what self-mastery feels like, when you no longer bleed for clarity. You realize that trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you is a form of self-betrayal. And the ones who demand explanations, they're not looking for truth. They're looking for angles, openings, weakness. They don't want closure, they want control. So you give them nothing. No reaction, no explanation, no last word, just distance. The stronger your mind becomes, the quieter you move. You don't correct the lies, you don't chase apologies, you simply operate in silence, letting your absence do the talking. Not because you don't have something to say, but because you finally understand the power of saying nothing. You've reached a level of inner authority where peace is worth more than proving a point. That's the discipline most people will never know. Let them misinterpret your stillness. Let them twist your silence into arrogance. You've learned that the right people don't need explanations, and the wrong ones will only weaponize them. Your calm is not weakness, it's containment, it's precision, it's refusal to leak energy into conversations designed to drain you. Comment if you've stopped performing for people who don't deserve your clarity. I don't explain peace to chaos. Number 9, the final blow, letting them destroy themselves. You don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to send a message, prove your worth, or punish anyone. The final blow is never delivered by your hands. It's delivered by their own mind. That's the beauty of walking away with dignity. The storm they once projected onto you becomes internal, and you don't even have to be present to watch it unfold. Their guilt, their confusion, their need to explain your silence to themselves, it eats at them from the inside out. While you've moved forward, they remain stuck, trying to outrun the consequences of their own behavior. Let them spiral, let them obsess, let them replay it all in a loop that has no exit. Because here's what they never expected. You didn't just leave, you left them with themselves. No distractions, no scapegoats, just their own reflection and the deafening silence you left behind. That's not cruelty, that's justice. You became the one thing they couldn't control, and now they are being crushed by the weight of that realization. You didn't destroy them. You simply stepped out of the way and let their own chaos catch up to them. And now, the very tactics they used on you, manipulation, delay, confusion, have turned inward. That's the final blow. Quiet, precise, complete. Comment if you've mastered the art of silent endings. I left. They broke themselves. And if this entire message speaks to the version of you that's finally done bleeding for the unworthy, like the video, subscribe to Stoic Spark, and turn on notifications. Because silence isn't weakness, it's warfare.